Tonight, our main speaker is Mike. Help me welcome Mike.
I'm Mike. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is April 23rd, 1985. For that, I'm grateful. It's good to be here. It's good to be sober. Didn't Tim do a great job? Right. He was a mess when he got here. Okay. So I'm his uncle, so I'll take credit for his sobriety. Actually, the first thing he got to do is learn how to clean up dog shit in my yard. Did a fine job. No, all seriousness, he's doing an amazing job, and I'm grateful that he came tonight and shared for a few minutes. Yeah, where do I want to start? What do we want to talk about tonight? How about we talk a little bit about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today? Not me, because it hasn't changed. A lot of you guys can validate that. Some of you that just got up here for a hug, you didn't even get your chip. So, I haven't seen that. Come and get a hug and a handshake without getting recognition for some period of sobriety. I think that's kind of cool. So after the meeting, if anybody needs a hug or a handshake, I'm going to be right up here. Okay? Tim said that we came from a family of alcoholics. My dad got sober when I was very young. There was a lot of recovery in my house growing up, a lot of AA in the 60s. And, we'd get home from school and there'd be, the house would be full of smoke and, there'd be coffee pots going and donuts and cookies and they would go to meetings and, this went on and on through growing up, and I got to see this, and most of the people in AA knew, there were 7 kids in our family. Most of us knew us. My mom, who died a couple of years, 6 years ago, right after Tim got sober. And as a matter of fact, she took him into the airport when he was flying out here to get sober. So it's kind of interesting to see how God has pulled a golden thread through all of these things. And I know for me, my mom used to laugh. That's where I was going with that. Like, my story tonight's just going to be me talking about different stuff, because that's what I feel like doing, and I'm up here and you're down there. So here's the deal. One morning, we were getting ready for school, and apparently my little sister was at the kitchen table having a bowl of cereal, and there was a drunk sitting at the table. And the police probably dropped him off the night before, because back then the cops weren't nearly as by the book as they are today. Okay, and we had a sun porch. We lived in East Aurora, New York, outside of Buffalo. We had a sun porch, and the New York State Police would drop drunks off, okay, and put them to bed on the sun porch. And my old man and his sponsor would take these guys to meetings, and my mom would, fix meals and stuff like that. So that was kind of the experience. So this particular day, this drunk sitting at the table, and I'm sure he was a chronic relapser, and he was just really in a bad way. And he's shaken, and he's sick, and he's whining, and he's talking about, I'm so embarrassed, I'm so ashamed, I can't believe this, I am just so sick, I'm so ashamed of myself, I'm so embarrassed. And finally my 8-year-old sister looked at him and said, "We've seen way worse than you." And, I think of the ego deflation at depth from a child, but most of us don't come in here on the tail end of a winning streak, And by the time we come here, we're hopeless. And I kind of want to talk about that for a few minutes. I had a gentleman come over today and to do a 5th step, and I think we spent about 5 hours together. And part of it was thinking about the hopelessness that we feel right before we get sober. And some of you that know me know that in my sobriety, I've had a lot of opportunities. I do a lot of speaking, but I've written a few books too. And I don't want to take credit for any of that. It's really God's grace. But one of the books I wrote, and I've studied AA history, and I've really kind of like studied AA history to a point where I probably need treatment for it, okay? Like, obsessively. So Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, was a subject that I was really fascinated with. And so I studied Bill's life. And Bill had this spiritual experience in December 1934 where he was laying in a hospital bed in New York City. And he had been to the hospital a couple of times. AA hadn't started yet. There were some people that were sober that were attending meetings of the Oxford group. And the guy that carried the message to Bill was a man named Ebby. Okay? And this particular day, now Bill got in the hospital and he had been there for a couple of days. And he wasn't in a horrible condition when he got there. So they were able to detox him relatively quickly. And he said he's laying in the hospital bed this particular morning. And he looks in the doorway and there's Ebby. And he says, Ebby, come on in. And while he's asking Ebby to come in his mind, he's thinking, why isn't this guy out looking for a job? Because at that point in time, a lot of the folks were pretty broke. AA started during a time when our country was really coming out of a depression and just a terrible time. And Bill was thinking, well, why isn't Ebby out trying to get a job? And then the next thought came to his mind, and that was, here's a man that practices what he preaches. I gotta interrupt myself too. I'm sitting over here before the meeting, and a guy came up and talked to me and made an amends to me that he felt he needed to make. And apparently, he was in my life 5 or 6 years ago, and I don't really remember that, but I can't begin to tell you how satisfying that is. Not that he made an amends to me, but that I didn't recognize him. See, when you get sober and you start living this deal and you get in the middle of this, people are not going to recognize you because we change so much. We start to look good. We start to feel good. We start to talk different. We start to think differently. We start to think more about someone else than we do ourselves. So this particular morning, Bill invites Ebby into the room. And he said to Ebby, he said, and now in the big book, you'll read the kitchen table story in Bill's, in the beginning of the book, okay? Now, I won't go into that. But that story is not exactly the version Ebby tells. I'll tell you that much, okay? Well, anyway, so Bill invites Ebby in, and he says, Ebby, what was that little formula that you shared with me when you called on me at my house? And remember, they didn't have 12 steps. So Ebby says, Bill, the first thing is we have to be completely licked. We have to be done. Okay, we have to be deflated. We have to accept our powerlessness. Okay, that is the first step. The second thing that we have to do is we have to believe in some sort of power greater than ourselves. And Ebby said to Bill, even if you just try it as an experiment. Okay. Then he said, then what we want to do is we want to write down all the things that we've done, the people we've harmed, kind of our life story, okay? And then we want to do a confession. So we do this inventory, then we do a confession. then the next part is that we pay restitution for harms done. So what we want to do then is go out and try to make right some of those wrongs. And then the last thing that Ebby said was, then we also want to share this and help others, kind of our 12th step, even though it was, at that time, it was more like a 6th step. So Ebby left. Bill sunk into what he called the deepest depression he'd ever been in. And in that despair, and in the depth of that despair, in the darkness that he sat in that hospital once Ebby left, Bill said he cried out as a child, "If there's a God, show himself." And he screamed that out in the room, and as he did, he said the room lit up a bright white light. It felt like he was on a mountaintop. And he could feel the breeze of the Spirit blowing through. And he knew he had been released. And he didn't talk about that release a whole lot in the book using that word, okay? But he did when he liked to talk. Now, I share that with you because that was Bill's white light experience, his profound spiritual experience. And here I am all these years later, and I'm studying this guy's life, and I'm thinking, wow, I've been sober 20 plus years at the time, and I didn't have a profound spiritual experience. I kind of felt like maybe I got ripped off, okay? Like, why did this guy have this really cool thing, and other people... And I was just kind of your run-of-the-mill drunken drug addict, that was trying to get sober. So, now I'm going to tell you what happened. I went to my then sponsor around that time. There was something going on in my life, okay? And some of you guys can relate to this. I woke up in the morning and I had a concern, okay? Then I thought about my concern for a minute. And it became a problem. Nothing changed other than I thought about it. I laid there with my new problem for another minute. Nothing changed, but I thought about it. It became a crisis. Within 3 minutes, my concern went to a crisis that was immobilizing to the point that I didn't know what to do. And I got out of bed and I called my sponsor and I went and had breakfast with him at Denny's. And I gave him my pitch. I told him what was going on. I gave him this crisis. And he looked at me and he said, "Your life is in divine order, unfolding into goodness." And I thought, he clearly didn't hear what I had to say. Being a salesman, I regrouped, I repositioned how I wanted to make my presentation. I gave it to him again from a slightly different angle, this time expecting to hear some wisdom and an answer to my crisis. And he looks at me and he says, "Your life is in divine order, unfolding into goodness." Clearly, I was struggling. And he could see that. And he said, "Mike, if you go back through your life as far back as you can go, and you look at all the circumstances and events that have led you to this moment, you'll notice that when you were afraid, the things that you were afraid of, for the most part, didn't happen. When you really, really wanted something and you didn't get it, what you ended up with was better than what you wanted." And he said, "Mike, if you look and you're honest about it, you'll see how God has pulled a golden thread through each and every one of those circumstances and events." Well, I went back and I started following Howard's directions. And in my meditation, I did what Bill suggested, an 11th step. Self-examination, prayer, and meditation are a principal means for communicating with God. And when these three things are done and they're logically interwoven, they create an unshakable foundation for life. That's in the 11th step. Okay? If they would have said that when I came into AA, I'd have been like, yeah, right. Okay? I mean, all I wanted was a job, a girlfriend, and a place to live. Okay? And I'd have been happy with a girl that had a job and a place to live. But, yeah, I was 25 years old, and I just wanted a break. And I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that I was sick and I could get better. I thought I was bad and needed to get good. And I failed miserably at that. So here I'm following Howard's instructions. I had been in and out of detox centers and psychiatric wards from age 15 to age 25. My first detox was in Children's Hospital. Okay? Alcoholism hit me hard, it hit me furiously, and it hit me consistently. I never drank, okay, socially. I don't know what that is. I never have had a drink of alcohol that I was not drinking for the effect produced by the alcohol. I had never taken a drug that I didn't take that wasn't being taken for the effect produced by it. Now, here I am, 15 years old, family full of recovery, Children's Hospital, trying to get sober, failing repeatedly over and over and over, detox centers and psychiatric wards, until I'm 25 years old. Finally, I get to the hospital my last time. Erie County Medical Center, and the admissions counselor came out to greet me in the lobby, and he put his hands up and he said, "We can't help you. You've been here too many times. Leave." It was as if the gates of hell had just slammed shut. I was sick. I was hopeless. I was full of fear. I didn't think I could get well. I didn't think AA would work. They didn't want me in the hospitals. Family, pretty much everybody was out of my life. I weighed 90 pounds and everything I owned fit in a cardboard box, and that's where I was at. And I left that hospital when that counselor told me I couldn't come in. And I did the same thing that any alcoholic in this room would do, and that was I went to a bar. Because I had no other solution. And drinking wasn't a solution. It was the only option that this alcoholic knew other than to commit suicide. And that was the plan. Get to this bar, having a drink. It's April 23rd, 1985. And when it's sunny and nice in April in Buffalo, you know it. And people open the doors and windows, and everybody's trying to get as much sun as they can because they just went through this horrific winter. So the door of the bar was open and it was sunny. And a city bus pulled up, and this lady fell on the ground that was trying to get on the bus. And I walked out of the bar and I helped that lady get on the bus. And I got on the bus after her. I've never gone back for that drink. Okay? Now, I share that story with you because I never paid much attention to that. To the fact that I walked out there and helped that lady. I never paid much attention to the fact that I never had to go back for that drink. I didn't pay attention to the fact that I didn't kick the lady, take her purse and run, because that was the kind of character I had become. But I didn't have to do any of those things. So here I am all these years later, looking at my life experience, doing self-examination, prayer, and meditation, kind of inventory and seeing how God has pulled a golden thread, and I get to that day. I get to that willingness for me to help that lady, to follow her on the bus. I believe that the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous happened for me at that moment. I also believe that it might not look like a room lighting up and a mountaintop and the breeze of the Spirit, but that was a really cool spiritual experience that happened to me And the reason I'm sharing it with you is I missed it. Took me over 20 years of sobriety before I recognized it. And I'm only sharing that because I'm wondering, is there anybody else missing anything? Pay attention to what's going on in your life. Look around at how your family and friends and things, a lot of you are new in recovery. Some of you are in treatment right now, and you have the opportunity to come here. And for some reason, we're together tonight, and we're sharing in a general way what it was like and what happened. So let me tell you a little bit about what it's like today. Yeah, before I do that, what the hell, I'll tell a little bit of Josh, huh? So I was 27 years sober. Yeah, 27 years sober. Traveling all over, doing some really cool stuff. Got this great life, beautiful family, 3 grown kids. My youngest at the time is 17 years old. I'm out in the garage doing some housekeeping, and I hear some noise, and I look behind me, and it's the narcotics division of the Chandler Police Department raiding my house, okay? I don't know if any of you have ever been involved in a home when they're raiding it, but it's some serious stuff, man. Okay, so I'm not the brightest guy in the world, right? They're yelling my son's name that's who they're there for, and they've got the thing that just kind of knocked the door down, and they're coming through the garage, and I step in front of them, okay, because I want to kind of let the family know what's happening. So I open the door and I run in the house, okay. And that wasn't really the right way to handle it. Anyway, so I'm laying on the floor in handcuffs next to my wife, and the police are trying to take care of the dogs and all this and do whatever they do when they're raiding your home. And I'm laying on the floor, and the thought comes to my mind, your life is in divine order, unfolding into goodness. I swear to God, it's I'm in handcuffs, 27 years sober. And all I can think of is my life is in divine order, unfolding into goodness. Here was the next thought that came to my mind. So is his. I'm not going to tell you his story, but I'll tell you just a little bit of it because it's my story, okay? But he's over 7 years sober. You got beautiful family, 2 kids, sober, a wife, beautiful wife, owns homes and businesses and all the stuff that comes when we take action. And that's really my message tonight to you is I'm sober today because I had some men in my life that gave me some incredible guidance, and they told me things to do. And I began to do them. Sometimes I did them well, and sometimes I didn't do them very well. But I never got a result for an action I didn't take. Okay? I'm going to say that again. I was never able to get a result for an action I didn't take. So what they taught me was that this wasn't about into thinking, that there wasn't a chapter in the book called Into Thinking, okay? But there is a chapter in the book called Into Action. And they explained to me that I needed to take certain actions if I was going to get certain results. And I think the book Alcoholics Anonymous, it's a design for living, and it tells us exactly what we need to do. Okay? Now, a lot of times when we're earlier, there's a lot of cobwebs, and it's a little foggy. And, I was talking to somebody this afternoon, and this guy's like, this is not the guy that came and did the 5th step. This was the guy after that guy. Okay? This guy calls, and he starts telling me how bad his life is. Okay? And he's got this job, and they want him to put input into the computer, and he's got to track this and all this. And he makes this comment that he's not like me. Okay? And what he was really kind of implying is he's not like me because I'm good at that shit, okay? Like, how would he know? I wrote 4 books and I can't spell, okay? I know nothing about the English language, okay? All I know is that you taught me to say yes and to show up and to do my best. And that's what I've done. And when I've been given opportunities and I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not afraid to ask for help. I'm not afraid to pick up the phone and say, hey man, you know what? This company asked me, they gave me an opportunity to write a book, and I said yes, and I signed the contract, and they sent me a check, and I spent the money, and I haven't written a word. And I'm scared. I had that conversation. And my sponsor said, just take action. Just start. And I did. And you know what? It all works out. So I don't know if you got a book in you that you want to write, or a message in you want to share, or a song in you want to sing. But I know that if you don't take the action, it's not going to happen. Now, if they told you that within 24 months, one of the people sitting in the little circle that you're in, of 9 people, is going to still be sober, would you look at the program differently? Do you want to be sober bad enough that you're going to be that one who's still sober? I'll tell you about Tim. He came in, we went to Saturday Night Live that night when I picked him up. It was a great meeting, a couple hundred people. There were some people there I wanted him to meet, but I didn't make that happen. I just kind of let it happen, okay? Tim, I got to tell you, man, I'm thinking that if there were 10 guys that were in the crew, 9 or 10 of them are still sober. Every one of them, man. Okay? That's so rare. So don't think that you can't do that. I don't care how many first times you've had, how many white chips. I had enough to decorate a room. Okay? Doesn't matter. Okay? What matters is what are you going to do with your sobriety today? So let's talk about today. Let's talk about sobriety. Okay? There's some little things I had to do when I was getting sober. One was they told me to pray. I said, I don't believe in anything to pray about. Doesn't matter. Pray. I remember I used to walk by my dad's bedroom occasionally in the mornings early, and he'd be on his knees saying a prayer. And later I asked him about it, and he said, my dad used to like to read the 24-hour day book, so he said, my sponsor told me to put the 24-hour day book in my shoe, and then put my shoe under my bed. And then in the morning, when I go to put my shoes on, I'd have to get down on my knees to get them from under the bed. So while I'm on my knees, I should say a prayer. And that was how he started. So here I am. I'm trying to get sober. I was living in Texas. They moved me from Buffalo to Texas, and I got down there to live with this guy. This guy got sober October 28th, 1951. And his grand sponsor was Bill W. Anyway, I went down there to stay with him for 2 weeks. I stayed 2 years. I did everything alcoholically. Okay? And this guy was a big guy. Yeah, and he would read to me, he'd ask me questions. I remember when I got there, he's like, how long you been around the deal, kid? And I'm like, well, 10 years. And he's like, I don't know if you got the guts it takes to make it, but if you do, we can show you by living proof how you never have to live that way again. Got that? We can show you by living proof how you never have to live that way again. He didn't say how you never have to drink that way again, how you never have to behave that way again. Okay? He said, you won't have to live that way again. We can show you by living proof, and you see it all around you here tonight. The living proof is we learn how to stay sober one day at a time. And then we do that, and those days add up. John traveled a lot because he would speak and he would have me drive, and he would make excuses when the committee would invite him, and he'd say, hey, I got the kid here, I don't really like to fly, he's going to drive me, blah, 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 so we'd be driving. We'd go from Texas to Canada, to Arizona, all over, okay, so he could speak at the conferences. So I'm just kind of doing what's in front of me. And he's reading, from As Bill Sees It, or AA Comes of Age, or the Big Book. And then he's quizzing me, okay? What's Dr. Bob's address, kid? And it was like AA school on wheels, constantly, okay? But I needed that. I needed to be in the center of this thing. And I really believe that because I was in the center of it, I'm standing here today sober. I really believe that, okay? So, in the book, Bill said if we're painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. Okay? Now, the word painstaking implies to me that there's effort. So if we're painstaking, okay, we will be amazed. He didn't say we'll be moderately satisfied when we get to this point. Okay? He said we'll be amazed before we're halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We'll comprehend the word serenity and we'll know peace. No matter how far down we've gone, we'll see how our experience can benefit others. Feelings of uselessness and self-pity will slip away. See, we'll suddenly realize that God's able to do for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. All of those things happen. That's the design for living that we have. So when we take the practical application, I think a lot of times it's difficult for us, especially when we're trying to get sober and we're young, okay? Because we haven't had all these life experiences. And many times we haven't lost, all that stuff. Like how can I was 25 years old, I was never really employable. I really didn't lose a lot of stuff because I never got anything. When you live the life that I get, it's like I didn't lose a marriage because there wasn't a woman stupid enough to marry me. Okay, I look at where I came from, and I have to realize that not every single one of us come in here at exactly the same place. The thing that we all have in common is that desperation, that hopelessness, that fear. The loneliness. I mentioned the word loneliness and fear in an AA meeting, and you can just see people's heads. Okay? That feeling of impending doom. Something's going to happen. It's going to be bad. It's going to happen to me. I just don't know when. And I got to walk around trying to live that way? That was my life story prior to coming into Alcoholics Anonymous. It was one series of impending doom after another, and then I would draw that stuff into my life. And I would wonder, why can't I get a job? Why can't I get a girlfriend? Why can't I have some sobriety or some contentment? It was because I wasn't willing to take the actions that are outlined in the book. And they're there. So, bottom line is this. I love you guys, man. And the reason I do, honestly, is because where else can I go? Where else can someone who is as broken as I was go and be accepted and be encouraged? I mean, how many people, how many are sponsoring people? Raise your hand if you're sponsoring anybody, okay? All right. I believe that one of our jobs as a sponsor is to be a good finder, okay? Find the good in the person that you're sponsoring, bring that out, pay attention to it, and make sure they know you're paying attention to it. Give you an example. I was sober just a short period of time, and John would say, "Hey kid, could you cook me some eggs for breakfast?" And I'd cook him breakfast. And he'd go around the whole rest of the day bragging about how good of a cook the kid was. Okay? It's ridiculous. This kid's the best cook I ever had. One time he asked me to make him spaghetti and meatballs, and can I make the meatballs round? And I made him snowballs. I took a loaf of bread, a pound of hamburger, and a dozen eggs, and I made these meatballs. They seriously were white and looked like snowballs. I fried them in the bacon grease that was on the stove from the morning, because I wasn't quite at a point where I was cleaning up after myself yet. And I fed that to him for dinner, and I got 2 weeks of compliments. He would stop people in the supermarket. "Come on over here. I want you to meet the kid." Okay? He had two names for me. One was Kid, and the other, my previous sponsor has asked me not to share from the podium. But anyway, he would grab people and tell them about this kid. You got to meet the kid. What I'm getting at here is this. He found little things that I could do. He would have me do them. Then he'd pay attention to them. And then he'd praise me for them. "Hey kid, would you you're going to talk tonight for 10 minutes at the podium." And I'd get up there, I'd be nervous, and I wouldn't know what to say, and I'd talk, and maybe I'd go 9.5 minutes, and then later, we'd get out to the car, and I'm waiting for John to tell me how great of a job I did. "Hey kid, you're going to be a circuit speaker." "And how'd I do, John?" "You did all right. You just talked too damn long." One of the things is a lot of times things that occur, we look back on when we're looking for that golden thread, and we laugh and we cry and we rejoice and we see life, okay? But we have to look at the evidence of our own experience. So let me share a little bit of what that might look like for you. You landed in Arizona with a headache, okay? Because you're coming to rehab. And you look around and you go, "My life is over. I hate it." Okay? And I actually helped a guy get in rehab like a bunch of years ago, and then like a week later he's in my kitchen. "What the hell are you doing here? Why did you leave?" Okay? And he said, "I didn't like the orange juice." I want you to know, man, that's my kind of alcoholic. Okay? Because that makes sense to me. I understand leaving an opportunity for recovery where I've got a warm bed and food and whatever else they have, because I don't like the orange juice. What that really is that is what a craving is. Okay? The craving and the obsession to drink, okay, doesn't leave right away. It takes time. And when we get into these situations, we're trying to get, and we're looking around, and we're not, and we don't know why are we here, and this sucks, and blah. I lived in a town that I went for 2 weeks for 2 years. Population was 800. There were more sheep than there were people, and they were nervous. I didn't say that from the podium. What I'm really getting at is love your life, man. Love everything that you do. If you're in treatment, love it. If you're not in treatment, love it. If you have a job, love it. If you have a family, love it. If you don't have a family, love it. If you don't have a dog, love it. If you don't have a tree, love it. Love, love, love. Because if you will do that, you will draw more love in your life. Because everything expands. Focus on that. you will know a new freedom. You will know a new happiness. Dr. Bob, the other co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, said if you took AA and you simmered it down to just two things, those two things would be love and service. Okay? I believe that if you simmered it down to one thing, and I'm not in any way trying to outdo Dr. Bob, okay, but I would say that one thing is love, because service is a manifestation of love in its highest form. That's what love is when we take action. A bell is not a bell till we ring it. A song is not a song until we sing it. Love wasn't put in our hearts to stay. Love is only love when we give it away. AA is only AA when you give it away. Thanks.